It was good. I'm Isaac Lee, and we're back with another review. This time, Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. So let's get straight into it. So with a movie like this, you kind of know what you're already getting into. It's the whole Exorcist movie where someone's getting possessed and things around the house move, the house shakes, things of all of that nature. And you definitely get that, and it's not really disappointing. This is the part of the Conjuring universe that I'm not disappointed with. I love like the main story arc of The Conjuring. I'm not, just to kind of get off the beaten path a little bit, I'm not too big of a fan of Annabelle and the Nun. But The Conjuring, the main thing, the story with Ed and Lorraine Warren, I definitely love them. The movie starts off with them doing the exorcism at this one family's house where a little kid's being possessed. And it's funny how in movies like this where you have people doing all the contortions, I was looking at this and I'm thinking, you know what, that's probably what makes it more realistic. Having people of different age groups who are naturally able to contort their bodies to where when you do the whole possession things, it makes it look more real. And that's exactly what they did. You know, they're doing the exorcism for this one little boy. You see like a main character, Arnie Johnson, you know, he gets a hold of the little boy and he's really talking to the demon, saying, oh yeah, just take me instead. He's just this little boy, just take me instead. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because there's a part in the movie where they're going over scriptures, you know, almost doing like a pre-exorcism because the actual minister, Catholic minister, he hasn't arrived yet. I don't know what you would call it, but I would just call it like a pre-exorcism. And it gets to the point where they thinking, okay, everything's fine now. The boy goes to bed. Next thing you know, he starts hearing like loud knocks on the door and things like that. He gets scared. He runs into the near bathroom. That's when he immediately gets possessed. And here's the part that I was like, are you serious? So because this kid has clearly shown signs that he's been possessed before. So you know how he is when this happens. So they go into the bathroom. The kid is looming in the darkness. Everyone else is outside. The father's the only one gonna step inside brave, be like, son, are you okay? I'm like, I'd be outside too, but like, yeah, you walk in there. I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, back to what I was saying before about Arnie Johnson. He's making the whole trade, talking about, oh yeah, just take me instead. And the demon is kind of like, sure, okay. So it takes you, and then fast forward to when, you know, he has his episode and finally flips out and kills somebody. It's funny that as a cop finds him walking down the road, he has blood all over his shirt and on his hands. First thing he says is, yeah, I think I killed somebody. You think? Like, how does he not get, they probably didn't show it, but he had to have gotten arrested right there on the spot. I'm like, that is the biggest like understatement. They're like, yeah, I think I heard somebody. I was like, really? It was an interesting moment, and I can imagine some people probably being like irritated by it. I guess you could look at it as kind of like a feminist moment. I guess it's a scene where they basically find out that the reason this family is possessed is because of a witch's totem that happened to be placed right underneath the house. So Ed and Lorraine Warren, they go to the house and they see this opening that allows you to like crawl right underneath. So Lorraine, she's like, okay, I'll just go under there and just go get it. And this is when it gets weird. This is when Ed is all of a sudden like, oh no, don't do that. You'll ruin your dress. I was like, where did that come from? I was like, that was just weird to say. I was like, it was almost like the movie paused for a little bit and you see Lorraine and the other girl who's part of this family just kind of look at each other almost like men. I'm like, that one little section was just weird. I'm like, but I do like the fact that Lorraine was kind of like she had more focus in this movie than Ed did. And it makes sense that Lorraine would have more focus in this movie because every time there's an exorcism, her soul is always at risk. It was like she is always like this close to dying, trying to get to the bottom of this, trying to solve this issue. Every time they have like some demonic issue, it's always Lorraine taking like the most like punishment of always being like the most at risk. So I like that the movie kind of recognized that and was like, you know what, let's just put more focus on Lorraine and we're kind of gonna sideline Ed. Like they give Ed like a heart attack early on, so now he can only hobble around with a cane, you know, and kind of assist a little bit as much as he used to. I was like, when it comes to this movie, I mean, you got what you were expecting. I'm really not expecting a part 4. I'm thinking they're just gonna leave it at a trilogy and just leave it at that. I don't know if there's any other place they can go. There was an interesting scene where when they were trying to argue the case, in defense of Arnie Johnson, talking about how, every time you put your hand on the Bible, you're acknowledging the existence of God, but now we need to start acknowledging the existence of the devil. And there's a scene where they're talking to, I think they're talking to like a lawyer or the judge. And it might have been a lawyer in whatchamacallit, in Arnie's defense. And she's all like, I'm not gonna go in front of the court talking about he's possessed by demons. I was like, and it was funny how they were kind of like, oh yeah, we can prove it, come by the house, we'll introduce you to Annabelle. I'm like, and I'm watching that like, nah, you don't need to introduce her to her. It was funny. They even had this one black guy who was like I guess the chief of police, I guess, so he's talking to Ed and Lorraine Warren, and of course he's rightfully skeptical too. He's seeing things from the perspective of the audience, because he's not believing in all of this. And then he kind of gives Lorraine his little test, because Ed is saying that no, Lorraine said it, that she can see things that her other guys can't see. And the chief of police, he was like, my guys have been combing this area for the past 3 months. So he gives her a little test where it's like 3 weapons that are already in bags that they taken out of evidence. And it was like, okay, which one was the murder weapon? So while the chief of police and Ed are kind of talking back and forth, in the middle of it, all of a sudden Lorraine just goes, it was this one. And then the chief of police looks back at the other officers like, how'd she know that? I also like how it continues where they're driving along in the car on this road, and he makes a comment like, man, it was lucky, it was 1 out of 3. So they're listening to this song on the radio, and it happens to be Elvis, and he makes a smart aleck comment talking about how, oh, I guess you met Elvis and stuff like that, or was that before or after he died, something like that. And she's like, oh yeah, I met him. He's like, oh yeah, I met him before and after. But yeah, even though it's like they like to call this the Conjuring like a Ed and Lorraine story, this was definitely more of a Lorraine story, and rightfully so. Like I said before, she's always taken she's always at far more risk than Ed. So I'm cool with this being more of a 60-40 split with Ed and Lorraine. But after all of that, those are just my thoughts. But what are yours? And if you like what I had to offer, hit that like and subscribe at the bottom. I'm Isaac Lee. This is The Rundown.